Welcome back. You're on the last step. You're doing the background. You're going to pull everything together and then you're going to touch little line quality, little bits here and there on the face, and then you are done. You are so close to being done. You should really celebrate. It took a lot of work to get here. I'm going to give you some basic options for background: an all black background, a fade, or get fancy with your bad self. I'll show you some student examples of each of those, and then I'll talk about what I'm doing with Zoe's piece. And then the very last step of all of this is going in and adding line quality to like the edges of your face and facial features here and there. And you're just going to be so proud of yourself, I think. I hope. I know that I'm proud of you. So good job, my friends. Take your time with this one. Don't rush through that background. It'll look rushed if you do and detract from all the work that you put into the rest of the piece. So take your time, build that background up, and you're going to have a beautiful piece in the end. Let's look at some student examples to see some possibilities that we have with our backgrounds. In this first piece, you can see an example of a background that is all black. This is a stippled portrait by Sam. And you can see how that black background really makes that face pop out at you. It really creates a nice focal point and contrast. Here's another example of an all black portrait with Anna's piece. You can see on the left side of her face that the shadows have gotten quite dark on her face and her hair, and having a black background helps to make that dark shadow feel right. It pulls it back into the background and makes her kind of fade into it. So a lot of times when I have students that have really dark shadows on their faces, I suggest doing a dark black or dark gray background just to make that shadow kind of fade into the face. You can see this really well on Tessa's portrait here, how that dark shadow on the right side of her face fades right into that background. It feels really dramatic. Also note on Tessa's portrait, on Anna's, the one before this, there's not a ton of background, so you don't want to do anything too complicated when you only have a little square or triangle of background in this corner and a triangle in that. Here's another one. This one's Orville's piece. There's a little bit of a reflection on the photo on this one. Sorry about that. But he also has these dark shadows on his face, and so he chose to do a really dark background, which helps to create drama, makes that light part of his face, the highlights there, really pop out nicely. Another option that a lot of students do is what I call the fade. So a faded background is what you can see here in Charlie's piece. It's dark towards the bottom and fades towards the top. And the fade can go in any direction. You can have it dark at the top, fade to light as it goes down, dark at the left, fade to light as it goes across, dark as the right, and then fade as it goes left. You could also do what's called a vignette. A vignette would be dark around the edges and fading towards lighter in the center, or the reverse of that, light around the edges, fading to dark as it goes in. But the fade can be a really nice way to get a little bit more value in that background, but not have a pitch black background. I think the fade on Charlie's piece here was a good choice because it adds a lightness to this piece where, Charlie's really laughing and it adds, some humor to it. Here's another example of the fade. This is one of my drawings of my son Eli. It'll transition into our next option, which is the fancy a little bit. But you can see the fade in this piece behind the plant. It's dark and it fades towards light as it moves towards Eli. And there's a little bit of a gray on the bottom as well, fading as it goes up. The last option that you have for doing a background is what I call the fancy. So it's just doing something a little bit more. It's not just black, it's not just a fade, but you're doing something that adds design to the piece, like you can see here in Kaylin's. She's really pulling your eye towards the center of the portrait by having kind of this starburst, sunburst behind her. She started this as a black and white sunburst, but it was way too distracting. It really drew your eye. So whatever you do in your background, you don't want it to draw your eye away from your face. You want to look at the person first, that's your focal point, and then you notice the background second. Here's another example by Amy. She decided she wanted to build kind of a frame around her piece, so she drew in a wooden frame and then she wanted it to kind of transition into the flowers on the other side to tell a little bit of a story about who she is as a person. Here's one by Emerson. So Emerson added this cloudy sky into the background. And please, folks, if you're going to add a background into your piece that's representational, find great images to base that on. Emerson didn't just draw those clouds as a stereotype. He looked at images of clouds and made decisions about what kind of clouds to include, where they have highlights, where they have shadows, how the sky is in fact quite a lot darker behind them, and how they get smaller as they move down towards the horizon. But I love this piece and the fact that Emerson put little little raindrops on his glasses. I think it's a really lovely, lovely piece. Last but not least, we have Jose's piece. He really went all out in the background of this piece, bringing in the galaxy, and in the end, he's going to have a nice dark sweatshirt that plays off that galaxy as well. But I think it really adds quite an interesting story to this piece. So your last option is to do a background that has a lot of detail in it and tells a little bit of a story about you, which is a great stretch if you're really willing to challenge yourself.
I've decided to do a darker overall background on Zoe's drawing. Darkest on the lower left, fading a little bit as it goes to the lower right. I'm no longer going to include the piano in the background. It feels a little too arbitrary and not purposeful in here. So before I start the background, the first thing I'm going to do is go in and erase all my grid lines, erase the piano, make sure I have a really nice clean background. I'm also going to use a small scumble so that there's a different type of mark that doesn't get confused with the hair or the skin. Plus, I just like scumbling.
First, I erase everything, get it cleaned up, and then I'm using my 2B, because I know I'm starting dark here, to do little scumbles, building them up slowly and layering. I'm going back in with a 4B where I want it to get darker, sharpening my pencil quite often because it's going to get dull quick. I sped this video up 3,000%, so I want you to know that this goes a lot faster than it did in real life. This took me quite a long time to scumble in the background. The biggest challenge for me when doing large areas like this and filling it with marks is continuing to be careful the entire time I'm building my marks. I kept wanting to get bigger scumbles, and I'd have to tell myself to make it smaller, to slow down, to layer up, to not line up my scumbles, and all the things that you want to do to make sure that you have nice mark making. Because if I rush these areas, you're going to see it, you're going to notice it. I want to have a nice subtle texture in that background, build up my values slowly, and really have a nice finished product. Here where I'm getting lighter, I'm using my HB now. I've moved from the 2B to the HB and just working on building those values up. The area where the hair meets the background on the right side, or the bottom of the screen in this case, there's a pretty sudden transition from light to dark, so I went back in with my 2B to try to blend that in a little bit, and then I'm going to continue with my HB right into the corner. I'd like to get a little darker in my background than it is right now, and I'll work that through in the finishing touches once I go in and add line quality to the face and little finishing touches to the edge of the hair.
At this point, I'm basically done with the background. I'll probably do some more blending in through here, but my next step really is to do just finishing touches. So I'm going to be doing some things like adding some edges along the hair, cleaning up the ends of the hair over here and blending where that t-shirt blends into the background. I'll darken up her hair over here, and then I'm going to go into her face and add line quality, and it's going to be subtle line quality in places that have really clear edges, like inside and outside corners of the eyes, underneath the nostrils, and in the lip line, just in patches. And as I go in and I add those, I'll kind of talk you through where to put those and why we put those in those spaces.
I'm going to start on the left side of her portrait and work in. I'm darkening up the hair on the left side of her head where I'm noticing it's a little too light for the shadow side. As I move to the left, I'm going to start working on line quality. So I'm looking at her face where there's really hard edges, and I'm using a really sharp 2B pencil on the left side of her face, and on the right I'll use a really sharp HB pencil. And I'm going to go in looking for those hard edges. And I'm just going to slowly add in a little bit more line in a few of those places. And it's really like a sprinkling here and there. I typically go in and I add a little bit of a line or an edge on the inside and outside corners of the eyes. Here I'm darkening up the eyebrow where I notice it needs to be a little darker in one spot. I'll add a little bit of line quality on the edge of the iris just so there's a nice sharp transition from the colored iris to the white of the eye, and then often a little bit of an edge underneath the eyelid and in the eyelid folds. On the nose, I'll add a little bit of an edge kind of in the center of the wing, not too far up or too far down, and a little bit of an edge on the nostril as well, kind of in the middle of the nostril. And I always take it slow and I take it easy. I build it in slowly. On the lips, I add a little bit of a line or an edge in the corners of the lips, and on the lip line, in the darkest parts of the lip line. Don't overdo the line. You don't want your drawing to look like somebody went and outlined the whole thing. There you saw me do the
line in the center upper part of the nostril, never underneath the nostril, just the top edge, okay? Let it fade out. Don't just do hard stops and hard starts. Let it fade. Here we do a little bit on the wing, and again on this lighter side of the face I'm using my HB pencil, and it's really, really, really sharp. If your drawing is in profile and you can see the edge of the bridge of your nose, that might also be a place that you put a line that fades in and out as well. And here I'm coming into the left eye. I'm adding a little bit of line quality to the upper edge of the lid, around the iris, the outside corner and the little fold that's there, where the lower lid meets the white of the eye. These places on the face where there's really hard edges. You don't want to add line quality to the edge of a shadow, for example, because that's not a hard edge, it's a soft edge. I also noticed that Zoe's eyebrows were a little lighter on her right side than they should be, so I'm going in with my 2B, and in the center of her eyebrow and the darkest parts I'm getting a little bit darker, so I'm adding a little bit more line quality in there to bring that eyebrow shape out just a hair. Haha, funny pun. Anyways. Just getting that detail right. So it's really me looking carefully at the face and thinking, where do I need to add line? Is there any place I need to add shadows? When the jawline comes into play, be really careful. Depending on how your face is oriented, there may or may not be the need for a line on the edge of your jaw. If your head is tilted to the side, so you're seeing the jaw blend into the neck, do not put a line there. Zoe, with the way that her head is facing and the shadows under her jawline, you can see it a little bit better. But you'll also notice there's areas on the jaw I did not add line. At this point, I'm going to work into the left side of the hair. I'm being careful to build in some values where I need to get a little darker, clean up the edges, and then I'm going to start working into that background again. I thought it was too light on the left side, and I really wanted it to be a bit more dramatic, so I'm getting a hair darker on the side as I work through it. Also notice when I work on the background, I move my drawing board so that I don't have to rest my hand on my drawing. I still have my acetate that I rest my hand on, but I'm going to move that board around.
And this is where I'm going to stop for now. I've gone in, I've added some line quality and some edges in my face. I've reworked the background a little bit. I feel a little better about that blend. Gone in and touched up the hair in a few places where it was still too light or didn't have enough definition. And I'm not seeing anything right now that I think that I need to change. So my last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sit this up on a counter or on my desk, someplace that I can have it upright and I can just kind of look at it for a while. And I'm gonna leave it up for a day or two and see what I notice about it. And then the process of leaving it up for a day or two, I might notice things that I haven't noticed before. I kind of come at it with fresh eyes. I'm also gonna ask my art teacher colleagues to take a look at it and see what they think. I'll ask my students to take a look at it and see what they think. I'm just gonna get as many eyes looking at it, giving me advice as I can. I don't have to take their advice, but I'm gonna get their advice just to see what other people notice about this. After leaving it up for a couple days, thinking about things, looking for things, getting advice from others, I'll probably go back in and make a few touch-ups here or there. At that point, when I know I'm done, I'm going to seal my piece. So I'm going to spray it with what's called spray fixative, which you can get at any art supply store. If you can't find that, you can also use hairspray, like an aerosol type hairspray, one that's like fluffy and not like a squirt kind, but the kind you go shh, and you stand about 12 inches away and you just kind of lightly dust it. That'll hold the charcoal dust down so that it doesn't blow around on you and get everywhere. Once you've fixed it, if you have a drawing setup like I do where your drawing is taped to a board, you have to untape it. Now this step can be ruinous if you're not careful. It's really easy if you know what to do though. To untape your board, you just have to make sure that when you take the tape off, you pull away from the drawing all the time. So I'm going to show you what I mean here. So I'm going to grab the tape here and I'm going to pull this way. I'm going to pull away and I'm going to keep that tape low as I pull along the board. If it rips, come in from the top and continue to pull away. Never take the tape off and pull towards your drawing, because if it starts to rip the paper and you're pulling this way, it's going to rip into the drawing. If you're pulling away, it'll just rip off that edge and out. I also always have students that want to cut off all of the margins. These are our margins. Don't cut the margins off. If you want to trim up a little bit on the bottom, if you ever mat or frame your piece, you want to have this little extra bit of paper here to sit behind the mat. If you cut right to the edge of the drawing, you can't really mat it without coming into the drawing even more. So leave that little extra lip all the way around your piece. That way you can mat it, that way you can frame it. It's just more versatile moving forward. Take care of this piece. You spent so much time on it. You learned so much in the process. I'm really proud of you for sticking with it, pushing through it, and I want you to think back on all the amazing things that you have learned in this process, and imagine if you were to do a portrait again, how much easier it would be and how wonderful it would be. And also look at this one and really be proud of your growth. Think about what you would have done for a portrait before this and compare it to what you did for this one. You should be really proud, my friends. Take time to be proud of the work that you do, and take time to be proud of the growth that you show. Take care, and I look forward to seeing your pieces.